Well, this is the last of the series, and this is more casual, as you can see by the way we're dressed and the fact that we're just still cleaning up. And but this is kind of the catch-all, the things that we didn't cover and other things, plus just some tips particularly aimed at people who are adjusting during the first year of marriage. We'll hit some things that we've already talked about just to reinforce them, and then there'll be some new things. We asked for some help on putting this together, and we asked a few people who are relatively newly married, give us some ideas saying, topic being what I wished I'd known or tips for the first year of adjustment. I was particularly amused at my eldest daughter and her husband, Sarah and Jeff. They gave us a bunch of stuff because they've been married just over a year at the time we're taping this. And there's all these things, do this and this and this, and this will make for a better first year, and this and this and this. My son-in-law, Jeff, works for the post office, and I was really amused at one of the bullet points on his list to adjustment is tip the postman. Was tip the mailman. And I thought, well, that's really not that bad of advice. So I would just like to say right at the outset here, buy coupons for dinner out for Pastor Appreciation Month. We like going out to eat.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to take a look at what I wish I'd known, last minute tips as the wedding day approaches, and tips for the adjustment year. So let's pray. Father in heaven, we ask that you would grant teachability and receptivity on the part of couples who are looking at these as they prepare for their wedding and for their marriage that follows. We pray, God, that you would use this time of us just passing on some of the things that we've learned and observed, and that it would be helpful. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, the first bullet point on your outline there says the importance of the first year. Deuteronomy 24:5 says, when a man has taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war or be charged with any business. He shall be free at home 1 year and bring happiness to his wife whom he has taken. Now, of course, this can't be taken completely literally to say that all you young guys, when you get married, you get to take the next year completely off. But there is a principle here, and that is that, that first year, there's some adjustments that go on, and you've got to give special attention to what goes on during that first year. This is the year, as someone has said, that the patterns are set in wet cement. Be careful what you set. It may take a jackhammer to change it later. In other words, if you don't get off to the right start, then you're going to get into bad habits, and it's much harder to break bad habits than it is to not form them.
And I don't know if your outline says it takes a good year to start, or that is to learn how to bring happiness to each other, but it really takes a good year to learn how to start bringing happiness to each other, because it takes a lifetime of practice to make each other happy. And after that, don't expect it to happen overnight. Especially in that first year of marriage, it's very easy to get discouraged and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know him that well.
Is that what you meant when you used to drive off? In the lowered car. Anyway.
Screeching around the corner.
Yeah.
But don't expect it to happen overnight, and it will come with patience.
Well, the next major point is the all-important spiritual dynamic of Christian marriage. And as it says there, it all stands or falls here, folks. If you, as Christian couples, if you don't set the patterns for your marriage with the Lord at the outset, it's just so much harder to make those changes later. Set the spiritual tone in your marriage from the very start. I mean the very start. Pray for each other. Pray for each other. You can't change anybody. It's hard enough to change ourselves, much less somebody else. But God can, and so pray. And of course, if you're praying for someone, especially if you're saying, dear God, change them, God may say, well, good, and I have some changes I'd like to make in you too. So pray for each other, and then pray with each other. Please, I can't tell you how much I plead with you as you get started in marriage to establish the pattern of praying together from the outset. It just makes a huge difference.
And then it's also important to maintain a daily devotional life. time in the Word and in prayer every day. It's essential. If we're not in the Word, then we won't know how to pray. And we won't know what God's will is for a Christ-centered marriage. So this is important. Just as the Lord commanded the children of Israel to go out and collect their daily manna in the book of Exodus, we also have to go out and collect our daily bread in our devotional times. And don't think, as some of them thought, well, I'll collect twice the amount I need to carry me through tomorrow. Because what happened to that manna is that it would rot and it would be unusable. So we need to collect our daily manna for our souls, to nourish our souls every day, a fresh supply of it, and that will nourish our marriages. So I get the next point. It's also important to maintain, number 4, an active church involvement, a life in church. Don't drift out of fellowship just because you are married. I don't know how many times we have seen where, a couple, we don't see it so much in couples who've been pretty well established in the church, but a lot of times you'll have a couple who comes in and for the duration of their pre-marriage counseling period, they're going to church actively and they're really liking it and very consistent with their attendance. And then as soon as they get married, well, the wedding day is the last day. We see that.
Literally.
Yeah.
There have been people who are faithful, and then literally, that's the last time we see them.
And any couple who puts off going to church on a regular basis is only flirting with disaster, and it'll be the beginning of the end of your marriage. Yeah.
When it comes to spiritual issues, what if one is stronger than the other? We want to say a couple things about that. As a matter of fact, stronger isn't even necessarily the right word, although in some cases it may be. But as it goes on, the A, B, and C there, don't judge if your mate is either more or less talkative about spiritual things, more or less demonstrative in their worship. One of them is much more comfortable praying out loud, and the other one is much more reserved, has a different kind of devotional life. Don't expect that just because you're married, everything about each other is the same. It's not, and it's never going to be, and you need to respect the difference. If you are, you should be praying for each other anyway, but if there is a concern about your mate's spiritual life, the most important thing you can do is pray for them. Because again, you can't change anybody, but prayer, God can change things. And then the other thing is be an example. If you don't think that your husband or your wife is dynamic and loving the Lord and in worshiping and what have you, don't judge them, but be an example. You follow the Lord and you pray, and then let God sort the rest of that out. We've said it before, but God, it bears repeating. Men, be spiritual leaders from day one. Be spiritual leaders. In the previous sessions, I think makes it clear what that means.
And ladies, follow his example. His leadership, unless, of course, he's forbidding you to do what God commands you to do, or insisting that you do what God forbids. And we covered this in a previous study. We taught that it's important that we follow our husband's leadership unless he's asking us to sin, and vice versa. This applies to newlyweds as well. For example, if he grows disinterested in church soon after you are married, and God forbid that should happen to anybody watching this, if he drops out of fellowship, don't follow that example. Don't stay in bed and sleep in or whatever. You'll be doing him a far greater disservice if you start dropping out of fellowship. You'll be doing him a far greater disservice than if you went along with his wishes to stay with him on Sunday mornings at home. Be a strong, godly example for him, and then pray for him that he will become a strong and godly example for you.
1 Peter 3, it's not only, it's speaking specifically about when a person's married to a non-believer, but the principle applies even if it's just a strong believer with a weaker believer. You don't preach at him, don't nag at her, don't carry on. Just you do the right thing, you be godly, and let God do a work in that other person's life. if he won't lead and if she won't follow. I know that's a far-fetched thing, but it's happened, I think, in 3 marriages in the history of time. But here's a couple of things to do. Well, I want him to lead, but he won't. I'm trying to lead, but she won't follow. Either way. I think the first thing to do is examine your heart. We have a tendency to see errors in other people much better than we see them in ourselves. And if she's not following, maybe it's because you're being a bozo. And if he's not leading, maybe it's because you're being overbearing. Check your own life out and see if you're not contributing to it.
I hope that this has really come across in our studies here about the importance of prayer. Pray for your mate. You can't overemphasize it again. Right. It has to be a part of your daily walk, and it has to be happening throughout the day too. There are times when I'll just break into prayer for my husband. No apparent reason, but the Lord knows why. Imagine sending out your husband on an errand on a raging snowstorm, without shoes, without the proper covering. Well, we're doing the same thing when we send him off to work and don't cover him in prayer. It's like arming our spouse. So we need to be there as their greatest prayer warriors and be faithful in that. Prayer is like that protective armor.
I think one other thing to just kind of wrap this little portion up, if you're trying to lead and you don't feel like she's following, if you want to follow but he won't take the lead, bottom line, you need to accept what is, because that's the way it is. And you need to accept the fact that in some cases, this is God's way of doing a work in your heart. It's God's way of teaching you to be faithful, and that your faithfulness is not dependent upon someone else's faithfulness. That really is an important thing. We learn patience by being married. She's learning patience being married to me. It's very, very hard to be married to me. I'm a very bad person. Here's the next major thing. Understand and respect different normals. Amos 3:3 says, "Can 2 walk together unless they be agreed?" There's got to be some togetherness in what's going on. So we want to say a little bit about that. Take it.
I do.
I guess not. Well, I thought she was going to talk about this. She thought I was going to talk about this, so just read it.
We both
It's
can.
right there. Understand that you grew up in different families and have different ideas about what's normal.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised at anything. Everything from cooking to raising children. Eventually, you will establish your own family's norms. But in the meantime, recognize, hey, you came from different backgrounds. It's amazing. When we first got married, I think one of the things that was fascinating was about cooking. I'm a guy who likes the kitchen. I like to cook. I like to eat. It's somewhat obvious. And Frances is from a family that cooking, it's like a 24-hour restaurant at her mother's house. It's just nonstop food, because there's 300,000 people living there. There's less now. Some of them got married. There's only 200,000 living in the house. But it was interesting. I came from a house where everything was neat and clean in the kitchen, and we used Revereware. And when we were done with the Revereware, we got out the Twinkle, for those of you who are old enough to remember that, and we polished the copper bottoms on the pots every time we cooked. And we hung them on the wall, and we only put things in the refrigerator if they were in Tupperware, sealed. And we cooked enough for our family, which was 5 people. We get married, and Frances is going to cook. She brings out these 50-gallon drums to cook in. She cooks enough food for 5,000 people, and when she's done, she just puts the whole pot in the refrigerator. We had some adjustments to doing on this. She didn't think that I cooked enough food, and I'm thinking, who's coming over? Mm-hmm. Is this a block party tonight? Mm-hmm. But we had to adjust. So now we have norms, and we just do it her way.
Another thing that was hard for me to adjust to was the quietness, a quiet house.
Yeah, I love quiet.
I was used to constant noise going on in the house, and it was very hard for me in the first year to adjust to a quiet Christmas and a quiet, everything was so quiet. And so, of course, we'd turn on our rock and roll records, our LPs, very loud. But even that has become something I cherish. There's those moments of quiet that I really have gotten used to, and that's okay. And then with children, the noise came back. But there were a lot of things I had to adjust to. And
with sons-in-law.
Yeah.
One other thing, though, is, as I said a moment ago, you come with your norms, because of how you're, don't expect, well, the other person's just going to latch on to what I think, or either way. No, there's going to be give and take, and you're going to come up with your own. And you're going to come up with your own ways of doing things. And that's going to be your family's norms. And then you're going to teach your children that so that they can be miserable in their first year of marriage. Okay? So study to learn what was normal for your mate. This is where you have to, this is some homework here. It's not always very easy to do this, but when it's possible, get to know what your mate or your future mate was like in their growing up years. You'll find out what was normal by getting to know the family, studying the family. What's the family dynamic in your mate's upbringing?
Mm-hmm. And if it is at all possible, as much as time or distance or availability allows, get to know each other's parents. You know, in the movies, you often see the girl bringing home her fiancé to meet the parents, and the wedding is next week. Well, that's not realistic. You want to get to know each other's parents. And even, if possible, apart from your fiancé at times. Get alone with them.
So you can get the truth.
Really. Now we have the medium of email or whatever, but we can always get on the phone and just, fire a few questions. Why is your son the way he is? Ask the parents about your fiancé's upbringing and how the family interacts. I regret not spending more time with my mother-in-law and asking her questions about Errol. I really wish I'd known more about what her perspective was on his childhood years. He's got a different perspective, but she as a mother could have really given me some valuable stuff.
That way she could have enjoyed me even more.
Yeah. But anyway, the family will give you clues as to how and why your fiancé thinks and acts the way he or she does. And it might save you some shock and surprise later.
I mean, literally, just even down to little things, has this person got a tantrum? Is it a temper tantrum type person? Does this person sulk when they're mad? These kinds of things.
Yeah. Also, be educated about how your spouse was raised to think and act in everything from communication to how conflict was handled, to cooking, to the laundry, and general organization. It will save a lot of arguments. I know that Errol's father was very different from my father. My father was fiery, passionate, and Errol's father was very gentle and calm. And so when Errol and I met, he was, and he still is, very good about handling conflict.
Very good.
He's very good.
He's excellent. Could be possibly the best.
Yes. About handling conflicts and stuff. And he really taught me a lot about communication and stuff, because it was something that, I didn't learn quite the same in my upbringing.
One last thing on this, and that is don't expect your mate to conform to your norms, not only because you're going to establish your own norms as a family, but then there's certain areas where one or the other of you that'll be like your area, and let them do it their way. What do you mean you wash dishes like that? Response, when you wash them the way you want to. I mean, there's certain things that are different. How you hang clothes. I mean, I like my stuff in my closet. I like all my shirts facing the same way, and I put them in color groupings. That's just the way it's got to be that way for me. And I got all the pants, the brown pants, the blue pants, the black and gray pants. She puts her stuff in drawers in a different way. We're different, and that's fine. Allow the other person to be who they are, and she has to put up with your kooky stuff. I mean, she has to put up with a lot of weird stuff from me, and so now it's your turn. You have to be put up with stuff. The next major bullet point: knowing, communicating, and understanding needs. Proverbs 24:3 says, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established." This is where it just comes to just saying, be understanding of one another, communicate with one another, try to understand each other's needs.
Mm-hmm. Know your needs and distinguish your needs from your selfish desires. For example, let's say one of you is more accustomed to being coddled, to being held, to being cherished in a physical way. You like to cuddle up. And the other one doesn't naturally do that. Certainly that was the case in our marriage. Errol has always been a cuddly person, and I'm like, what? But it was important for him to tell me I need to be held more. And so...
So she had to bring herself to do it.
I didn't used to laugh at this kind of stuff. And communicate that to your spouse. Let your spouse know what your needs are, but be careful with selfish desires. I need to have my toes massaged, every night.
Oh.
And we don't do toes. I don't.
I've never seen her feet. I've never seen them. They've been covered. She wears shoes in the shower. Of course, not that I've ever seen her in the shower, but
We laugh a lot.
yeah.
But anyway, ignoring your needs, okay, the things that you do need, and things like this, of needing some nurturing or whatever, or just needing to talk to somebody, maybe your spouse is not much of a communicator. Ignoring these things can lead you to become frustrated and with your spouse when he or she doesn't know what they are or how to fulfill them. Therefore, the next point is to express your needs to your spouse clearly and specifically and non-critically. And as my daughter put here, attractively. Don't expect your spouse to just simply know what your needs are. Don't expect your spouse to be a mind reader. And ladies, this is especially important for us to remember because we not only read expressions and mannerisms, we look at the eyebrows and the lips and the whole bit. We not only read them, we read into them. It's not very often that a man will walk away from a conversation with another guy after they've grunted over a football game or whatever, and the guy will say, gosh, he looked at me kind of weird. But we would say that, and we've got to be really careful with that.
So a guy, he says something, and his wife says, what do you mean by that? Well, what I said. Yeah, but
The way you said
the way you said it, and the way your face is, it's like, well, it's the only face I got.
Yeah, yes. And then the next point, notice when your spouse does something, when your spouse is trying to be sensitive and is trying to respond to your needs, and say thank you. Thank your spouse. Recognize him or her for this. Follow the golden rule and appreciate and cherish your spouse as much as you want to be appreciated and cherished.
Yeah, we learn from that. When we learn, oh, she liked that. Do that again.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a little slow, guys, but we can learn. We can learn. What is the thing? I can change if I have to. Yeah, well, you have to, okay? One last thing on knowing and communicating, understanding needs. We think it's a good idea. This is just advice. Take it or leave it, but I think it's a good idea to take it. At least once a month, preferably a couple times a month, sit down with a calendar. Now, maybe one or both of you, neither of you, whatever, keep a day timer or what are they, the little computer ones nowadays for the techies and stuff. Or maybe it's just the calendar that's hanging in the kitchen on the wall. But you know what? Communicate about what the plans are for the coming month, so that you're not making plans to go off and do this while he's making plans to go off and do that. And then you go, what? You were double booked and this kind of stuff. So it's really simple stuff, but it's sometimes things people don't think about. And then there's all these conflicts. Well, we're not going to your family. We're going to my family. Well, if we would have talked about that beforehand, that wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have been an issue. Okay, with having talked about knowing, communicating, and understanding needs, we get to the next major bullet point: conflict. It will happen. I know it's hard to believe. Right now, you're in love, and if you're deeply in love, you're probably kind of silly and a little dumb, but it'll set in, and you'll be aware that conflict happens. Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It's not easy, but it's an important thing to make sure that is remembered in your marriage. Don't be surprised if some little annoyances that you brushed away at first, after a while, it's like, if you do that one more time, For those of you who are old enough or have watched reruns of The Honeymooners, one of these days, to the moon. And it's something that didn't bother you before, but it's just like, would you quit that? And we do that to each other. All of us do that. It can grate on your nerves. We got to be prepared. Hey, so often it's the stupidest little things that just really get under our skin about each other.
Mm-hmm. And when there is a conflict, be prepared to forgive, because, that is what Jesus was always prepared to do. to forgive a person who offended him. Our forgiveness counteracts the negative effects of our spouse's mistakes. Forgiveness is one of the hardest things that we will do as human beings because it is so contrary to our nature, but it is an imitation of Christ, and we must be prepared for that. Also, there's a difference between raising a concern with a specific request for change and then simply criticizing. Mm-hmm. Begin this kind of a discussion with thoughtful words, with a pleasant face. But even before all this, even before you raise a concern, pray that God will hold your tongue from saying the wrong thing. This is a constant problem with me. To maintain an attitude of prayer while a conflict is about to begin, or maybe a concern needs to be raised, God, give me the right words. Show me how to communicate this to my husband so as not to offend him or stir the pot or whatever.
Yeah, we're usually pretty good, and the longer you're married, the better you get at finding the buttons to push. Don't push the buttons. We need to learn to not do that. It's hard. I mean, 31 years, and we're still working on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's real important. Try to see each other's point of view. The hardest thing sometimes is you're not listening to me. No, you're not listening to me. No, you're not listening to me. No, you're not listening to me. Neither one of you listen to anybody. And the idea is to slow down and say, okay, well, help me understand what you're talking about. Because quite frankly, it doesn't make any sense at all at this point. And then after you hear it, maybe it will. And that means while you're listening, don't just smile and nod while you're planning your rebuttal. Think about what the person is saying and try to get it. When you let me give you a couple things about when not to argue. Okay, when not to argue. There could be a longer list. When you're about to go out, because then you take it with you. When you're in the presence of others, and then for sure, and this is your pastor speaking, on the way to church. It's interesting. We have these little we have prayer meetings before the church services here at Grace Bible Church, and we have these little papers that give information and ideas about what to pray as we're preparing for the service to begin. And one of them is on there, is to pray for families who are getting ready to come to church and who are on their way to church, because inevitably there's people like that, then they come to church. Praise God.
Yeah.
That helps, So don't argue when you're on your way to church.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need to
wait until afterwards. And then really go at it, hammer and tongs.
Yeah. Now that you're all prayed up and fed up and with the Word of God. Take a break. Sometimes you need to take a break. In the same way that a frustrated mother was trying to deal with a screaming toddler and a kid who's not doing his homework, you need to sometimes withdraw yourself before you become irate and irrational. Take a break sometimes. Don't continue to complain when you can see that your spouse is already overwhelmed or exasperated. He or she may need time to digest what you have, put out there, and needs to be given, some time, appropriate time to respond. You also may need to take a break just to cool off yourself. You may find that you are completely wrong in your position, but
there's no way you're going to admit it.
Right, not
at
when
that
you're right.
point.
Exactly, not and understand that you don't have to settle every disagreement on the spot.
Absolutely.
You've got a lifetime together.
Yeah, you can argue about stuff for the rest of your lives. Why?
Keeps it spicy.
Why settle them? And that's really the next point. Don't expect to solve every single conflict. Some conflicts, it's like, you know what? We're going to agree to disagree on this. Because you're not going to change, I'm not going to change. We're in this. Divorce isn't an option. Murder probably not a good option. So just live with it. Just work with it. And also recognize that this is, again, a way the Lord can be working in your life. Personality tendencies and quirky habits are not marriage threatening. Learn to dance around them instead of trying to stomp on them. Learn to let the small stuff go. It's like, whatever. It's the way it is. It's the way it's always going to be. And so just go for it. It's interesting for us, and I have to admit, it took me, I want to say about 28 years, literally, You know, we're coming up on 31, and it took me about 28 years for some of the stupid, petty little things for me to finally I find myself cracking up at it. It's like, what's the point of getting argued about this? You know what? After 28 years, I learned something. I'm a quick study, okay? She's not going to change on this. It's not going to be any different. On the day of my funeral, it's still going to be the same. So why worry about it? Just let it go. And so I laugh at it and I crack up and I say, hey, this is who we are and God put us together. And so this is a way for me to learn to just cool my jets a little bit on certain things. Learn to laugh. Learn to laugh. I tell you what, learn to laugh. And also be cool when your mate is laughing at you. Because sometimes one or the other of us will do something and the other one just starts cracking up going, you know, you really are something. You're a piece of work. And they're laughing, and then our natural tendency is, it's not funny. But you know what? It is funny. So just let it go. Say, yeah, laugh, high fives. This is great. You know, we got married and we love to laugh, and here's our chance. It happens to be at my expense at this point, but, you know, maybe next time it'll be at yours. Okay, next one. Guard your relationships from outside intrusions. We've talked about this a little bit in a previous study. If you remember, there's the one where we have the 3 concentric circles, and we talked about that. Ecclesiastes 4:12, though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him. Of course, the rest of that verse is a threefold cord cannot quickly be broken, so the dynamic of the Lord is in there. Just a couple of bullet points in this. Do not let in-laws buy you. We've seen this. Fortunately, we've never had this problem because neither one of our families have any money. But it's very tempting to be bought. And if you are bought, you're done. If one or the other of the in-laws buys you. And I don't know how to say it any other way than that. They give you, they provide for you, they take care of you. And you know what? Don't ever believe that there are no strings attached. There are. That's just the way it is because we're human beings and that's the way we work.
And don't let in-laws pressure you. I don't think Errol and I really experienced that in our marriage.
Neither of our parents, as soon as we were married, it's like we weren't alive anymore.
Right, yeah. We had to call them in order to...
Hi, we're your children.
Hello! But there are those couples who really suffer from the pressure of in-laws. This is how you're to raise your children. This is how you are to run your finances. This is how, you name it. There are some in-laws that are very, very meddly type of people, and you've got to pray that you don't succumb to the pressures of your in-laws. But do pray for them.
And plan for the day, long time from now, for most of you, that you will be in-laws. We're grateful. We make jokes about our parents not paying much attention to us after we got married. But you know what? They would have been there for us if we needed something. We're not saying anything negative about our parents. But we were pretty self-sufficient. We were pretty well taken care of, and so things were going okay. But you know, I love the fact that our kids ask us for advice on a lot of things. But once they're married, I know that just like even in the first few months of our oldest daughter's marriage, she would email me and ask me questions, not about her marriage, but just about other things, spiritual things, you know, stuff like that. And I wrote back, I said, ask your husband. You know, I think I have something to say. I mean, I've been around for a lot of years. I've been in the ministry for a lot of years. I do have some advice and stuff. But you know what? Talk to your husband. That's God gave you a husband. Go talk to him. And if you didn't, not that she doesn't trust him, but it was learning to make that shift. It's not mom and dad anymore. It's my husband. It's not mom and dad anymore. It's my wife. That's who I need to be going to.
Thank God he's a wise man. Our son-in-law.
Yeah. I know she couldn't have been talking about me. In-laws. Here's a real practical thing about in-laws. This is something that we never decided on this, I don't think, but it's just something that kind of grew, and I think it works really well. And so it's just a tip: take it or leave it. When you're at her house, I mean, with her family, let her decide when it's time to leave. And when you're at your house with your family, you say when it's time to leave. Which means a couple things. Which means if you're bored to tears and you don't want to be there anymore, just suck it up. You don't want to be saying, well, I got to get out of here. It's her family. She wants to be with him. I got to get out of here. I can't say. It's his family. You don't marry an individual, you marry a family. It all comes for better, for worse. So when you're at each other's houses with each other's families, let the one who's from that family be say, hey, it's time to go. Now, one more little thing to throw onto that, be sensitive. If you see your husband or your wife in a corner with a razor blade at their throat, you should probably say, honey, do you want to go? But at any rate, you get the idea.
Another thing is, don't complain about your in-laws to your spouse. And don't agree too loudly either when your spouse is complaining about his parents. Remember what it was like when you were a kid and you'd say something about your cruddy little brother or sister, and then your friend would chime in and talk about how cruddy they are too. You would get offended because, hey, no, that's for me to call my little brother a creep, not for you to call my little brother a creep. So don't you say that my brother's a creep. And it's that same old thing with the in-laws. You don't want to badmouth your in-laws to your spouse and vice versa. And also be careful.
You don't want to encourage each other. It's like when someone says, oh, my mother, she's driving me crazy. I know your mother is crazy. Hey, besides the fact that that's not a good thing to say, you're encouraging someone to break one of the 10 Commandments. Because to honor your father and mother doesn't end when you're married. You honor your father and mother for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And so we want to specifically just take a moment right now to look in the camera and tell our own children, take care of us in our old age, or we will come and get you. Okay? Anyway.
Okay. Another point that is really important because it can ruin your holidays, and that's decide who you're going to spend your holidays with. Now, Errol's sister, she's always done this setup, and it's like our child is now beginning to do it, and I think it's a very good idea. They'll spend every other Thanksgiving with one family, and then Christmas and then they switch Christmas and Thanksgiving. So every other year we'll see our daughter for Thanksgiving, and on and on. But however you work it out, decide on these things from very early on. Be talking about these things during your pre-wedding planning days so that when the time comes, you're not going to ruin your holidays. And this also can become a sticky in-law situation too. But when grandchildren are added to the equation, it can become even worse. So set your guidelines now to avoid the conflict later.
And also recognize, just trading off, that isn't necessarily the best in every situation. One family, like Thanksgiving may be like a huge thing for them,
yeah.
And the other family eats Swanson turkey dinners. And you just say, you know what, Thanksgiving's a big deal with my family. Hey, for years we had Thanksgiving with my family every year because for my mom, Thanksgiving was like the thing. I think my mom was into Thanksgiving even more than Christmas because Thanksgiving was huge.
Yeah,
it was like such a big formal thing. Mm-hmm. And so we always, for many, many years, we went to my family for Thanksgiving. And it wasn't like we had to feel like we had to trade. We'd spend our Christmas Eves with hers. The thing is work together and don't let it become a point of conflict. Mm-hmm. Speaking of outside intrusions, do not neglect outside friendships. Just because you're married, don't all of a sudden become a recluse to where you never talk to any of your previous friends. But at the same time, don't ever let those friends get in the way of your marriage. It's a tightrope walk. You don't want to just say, well, now that I'm married, you're not important anymore. That's chump. But at the same time, you don't want to leave your husband or wife hanging out to dry because you're running around, especially with all your single friends. Remember the concept, leave and cleave. And then one last thing, don't let your jobs get in the way of your marriage, whether it's because of the time or because of the stress. Listen, if your job is stressing you out so much that you're taking it out on your husband or wife and you can't deal with that any better, then it's time to look for a less stressful job. You can't sacrifice your marriage for a job because I have to work 300 hours a week. You know what? Then you have to find another job. Because you married this person, you've got to give yourself to them. Okay, next one. Be best friends, not adversaries. We call this series Being Best Friends. Be best friends, not adversaries. Song of Solomon 5:16. This is my beloved. This is my friend. Mm.
And in times of conflict, it is so easy to forget that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to slip into disrespectful words and overfamiliarity. So remember to speak kindly and respectfully to your spouse. And ask yourself, would I speak to other people, other friends, the way I speak to my spouse? This is going to be a constant uphill battle because for most of us, we develop these patterns of speaking disrespectfully to each other as siblings or to our parents. And so we carry that into our marriage. Maybe not in the very beginning, but then we settle into that again. So we have got to be constantly on guard against that and prayerfully that the Lord would take that away from us.
And if you say, well, but I speak disrespectfully and rudely to everybody, get a life. Nobody likes you, okay? But it is true, isn't it? It's amazing. We say the harshest things to the people we love the most.
It's true.
We would never say that at work, or we'd get fired. And we feel free to say our husband or wife, call names.
And let's
or
not
whatever.
forget that Jesus Christ is a constant guest in our homes, and so He hears everything that we say to each other.
This next one is a point where this is like one of these emphatic ones as far as I'm concerned. Never take sides against your mate, ever. I might add, with anyone. It's a temptation. Do not take sides against your mate with anyone, ever. Even if they're wrong, shut up about it. But don't ever put them down. Don't ever speak. And the places where it's really tempting to do it, it's really tempting to do it with the kids. Like if the kids and you are upset with mom or dad, as the case may be, it's easy to go, yeah, that's the way she is, and everybody just gangs up, or oh, that's the way he is. Don't do that. Don't take sides against your mate ever. If they're wrong, deal with it privately.
That's a real challenge for women because a lot of times the children will come to mom and say, Dad was kind of rough.
Dads are bad. That's it.
Yeah. And so mom can overreact and oh, you poor dear, whatever.
He's so male. That's so wrong of him.
I'm so glad we can laugh.
Yeah.
Another,
See, we laugh. It's all.
Another aspect of being best friends is to care for each other by sacrificially giving something up for your one of your own comforts, say, for the sake of the other one. Every once in a while, a little neck massage or playing with his hair, something that will pamper him. When you know that you'd rather be sitting on the couch with your feet up, give him, do a little pampering. Scratch his back or whatever. When you get yourself something to quench your thirst, ask him if he wants something. You go get yourself a cup of coffee, ask him, would you like a cup of coffee too?
When something comes up that you need to discuss right now, discuss it right now. We need to go faster because our tape's going to run out. Okay. Pray together, spend time together, take walks, turn off the TV. Spend time together. It's so important that you forget the TV, play a game, take a walk, be together, talk. That's so important. Next thing, be lovers, not roommates. You want to be friends, not adversaries, but you really want to be lovers, not roommates. Proverbs 5:19, and always be enraptured with her love.
And for engaged couples, this means wait. Do not open the presents before Christmas. Just as, the church comes to Christ as a pure and holy bride, and that relationship is consummated in heaven, then marriage should be an imitation of that as well.
And if you're engaged, let me just tell you a myth that isn't true. We're married in God's eyes. No, you're not. Respect each other. Respect each other. Because you are married is no reason to stop acting like gentlemen or ladies and gentlemen. Be lovers. Say kind things. Speak nice. Be respectful to each other after you're married. Once you're married, keep your intimate relationship alive. Keep it fun, but don't let it become sinful. And we've already dealt with that in another session.
Did you want to keep
Gals?
I thought you were going to say that.
No, I was going to say the next part right there.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna
All
say-
right, let's trade.
I was going to say.
All right,
Let's say it
gals,
together.
be the moral conscience of your marriage.
Because men need this.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
We men need this. Be the moral conscience. Again, we talked about that in a previous session.
We need to understand men, and there's plenty of literature, certainly here in our church, to help us to understand men. Don't judge him for his weakness. He's a man. What may not bother you at all, you might be flipping through a lingerie catalog, not a problem for you, but it might be for him. Protect him. If men didn't have such a weakness for that sort of thing, then the market wouldn't be so big for it. So be the moral conscience and pray for him in this area.
So important.
Yes.
She just said, gals, understand men. Guys, you're never going to understand women. phone it in, it's over. You're never going to understand them because they change. As soon as you think you get them figured out, they change.
Yes.
They're constantly changing.
Yeah.
You know what? Instead of trying to figure them out, just flow with it. Okay, that's it. Just go with it.
Yeah, because sometimes we're winter, and sometimes we're summer, and sometimes we're spring or fall.
And guys, we're just cavemen. That's it, you know? Yes. All right. Take care of yourselves physically. 1 Corinthians 6:20. For you were bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. You know what? Let me just tell you something. This is another thing that we've observed all these years of watching young couples get married. Just because you're married is no excuse to let yourself go physically. You know, it's amazing. It's like, you know, some people get married and 6 months later they're ready to be in the Macy's parade. You know, whoa, look at these things. Hey, come on. You didn't get them. You didn't. You didn't get each other by not taking care of yourself physically. It's natural to relax, but don't just like cover the 11 Western states.
Help and encourage each other, but don't nag and don't embarrass each other. And one really important thing to do is to pray for each other in this area. You know, Lord, my spouse is, getting out of shape or stop painting the barn or whatever. Pray, and the Holy Spirit can do the convicting.
I've asked Frances to just put a chainer on the refrigerator to help me.
And guys, listen, she can't eat as much as you do, so don't expect her to. If you fix yourself a 4x4 supersized tray of nachos, one for you and one for her, don't expect her to eat that. And if she does eat it, don't expect her to be slim and trim and lean, fighting machine. Maybe you shouldn't be eating that much anyway, but offer a little bit, yes, but don't expect her to eat the same servings that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, making a home. Titus 2, verses 4 and 5. Admonish the young women to be discreet, chaste, homemakers. Guys, let me just tell you something. Expect, allow, and encourage her to foof the home, the apartment, the condo, whatever it is. It's natural. That's what women are about. And so, that's a good thing. Encourage her. She's nesting. She's making a home, and you'll be grateful for it.
But don't overfoof the home.
That's right.
Because, a man does live there.
Put some antlers up.
Exactly.
Make sure there's antlers hanging in a couple of rooms. Some guns.
Yeah.
Some full body bear rugs. Heads of elephants that you've gotten on safari.
There's got to be a place where his husband can rest his feet without, frillies and ruffles and flowers everywhere. A man's got to be a man.
Where I go into some people's houses and I look at the guy and I don't say anything. I say, "You poor devil. You live in this boudoir. Everything is so
Feminized. Yeah.
So there's no wonder the guy wants to spend all the time in the garage, to get away from that kind of stuff. Okay, finances. Again, we spent a whole session on this. 1 Timothy 6 through 8. Now, godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world. It is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these things we shall be content. If at all possible, live on one income, preferably his, and you will not set yourself up. By doing that, you won't set yourself up to say, well, we can't afford kids because we've established a lifestyle that's dependent on two incomes. You say, well, if we live on my income, what do we do with all of her money? Well, let me give you a couple tips what to do with extra money. That's a laugh. Who's got extra money? But if you have extra money, bank it, invest it. I'm telling you, the best time to put money away for retirement is in your 20s. Put the money away then. It'll do so much more for you later than when you're in your 40s. You go, we should start putting away for a rainy day. Dude, the clouds are looming. The rainy day is upon us. The flood is about to hit, and you're going to be standing out there with nothing. So think about those things.
And an encouragement for ladies, if you hopefully will stay home and raise your children, don't misuse the funds. His hard-earned money needs to be well managed, so try to make every dollar stretch.
Next one. The next major bullet point, it's the last one too, as the wedding day approaches. Proverbs 19:21, there are many plans in a man's heart. Usually there's more in a woman's. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that will stand. Listen, prepare. I plead with you as your pastor. Prepare for marriage, not just for the wedding. People spend time, they spend money, they argue, they go crazy, they go nuts. And they invest themselves, they learn, they do all these things in order to get this one day. It's one day. It's a great day. It's an important day. It's one day. And then it's like pulling hen's teeth to get people to sit down and talk about spiritual things. Look, the marriage is a lifetime. So as the day approaches, do not forget the marriage because you're so intent on what's going on for the wedding.
And as we mentioned before, don't open the gift until Christmas Day. Keep yourselves pure. Don't spend so much time alone that you fall into a situation of temptation. Ladies, don't lead him on. It's so easy to do this, and it doesn't take much for him. He would probably take everything you are willing to give.
Probably.
So again, start to practice. Start practicing being his moral conscience.
Yeah. When it comes to the wedding, when it comes to life, but start learning with the wedding, don't spend more than you can afford. Please save yourself a lot of trouble. Do not spend more than you can afford. You don't need to impress anybody. Your wedding is not about impressing people. Your wedding is about a wonderful time between you and your husband or your wife and family and what have you. Here's just another thing. Don't place demands on those in your wedding party that are unreasonable. Time, finances. They have lives too, and it's maybe a shock to you. Right now, the most important thing in your life is preparing for this wedding. The most important thing in their life is not preparing for your wedding. Back in the olden days, when Francis and I first got married, it was not uncommon. I think this was terrible, by the way. It was not uncommon that every person in the bridal party was expected to pitch in just cash to help pay for the wedding. You know what? You ask people, do you want to be in my wedding? And then after they say, yes, good, here's all I want you to do for me. You know what? Think about it beforehand if you can and say, I'd be honored for you to be in my wedding. Here's I think what it's going to cost. We're going to have to do weddings, we have to do tuxedos, whatever it is. Is that good for you? And are you okay with that? Because I don't want that to become a strain on our friendship. See what I'm saying? It's real important. Don't put unnecessary strains on them.
And brides, cover up. This is a time to show that you're a virtuous woman. Weddings are no excuse for Christians to forget the virtue of modesty. At a recent women's conference, the speaker said, since when do we throw out the biblical principles of modesty for a wedding as Christian women? And cover up your bridal party too.
Speaking as a pastor who stands here with the couple here, you know what? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The pastor, I want to hold the book up because I don't want to be looking down the front of your dress. Put some clothes on, brides, and put some clothes on your bridesmaids.
And then there's plenty of time for fun at the reception, but let's make sure that we keep that wedding ceremony holy, and it is a time where it's a worship service is what it is. It's also not a time to be, the altar kiss should also be holy. I know it's a personal qualm maybe with me, but that's no time to be making out passionately. This is a wedding ceremony. This is something that is done before the presence of the Lord. And may I just add, to research the origins of certain traditions that we practice at wedding ceremonies and at receptions, and ask yourselves prayerfully, is this something we want to carry on?
Is this something that honors Christ?
Yeah.
Have a lot of fun in the reception, but keep the wedding ceremony holy. Yeah. That's a holy time. That's a very special time. When it comes to the honeymoon, again, don't do more than you can afford. You don't need to impress anybody. The whole concept of the honeymoon is to spend time alone. One of the things that we remember most about our honeymoon is we spent an entire week where we only talked to waiters, waitresses, and people at hotel things. And the rest of the time, for an entire 6 days, whatever it was, we just talked to no one but each other. And you know what? It didn't cost anything. We drove up the coast. Of course, it was a different era and what have you. But, you don't need to go around the world. You don't need to do a lot of stuff. If you got the money, go for it. But don't spend more than you reasonably can. Well, those are our tips. And we hope that they're helpful. I know it's a lot of stuff. That's why we give you these things in writing. Go home, talk about them, work through them. Talk about us, how crazy and stupid we are. If you want to, that's fine. But we believe that these are things that, out of a lot of years, not only of being married, but of a lot of years of being involved in a lot of weddings. I've performed a lot of weddings. Frances has sung at a lot of weddings. As a pastor's wife, she's attended with me a lot of weddings, a lot of wedding rehearsals. Since we have time, wedding rehearsals. Make sure your bridal party shows up. It's a tough thing. We said this whole series is called Best Friends, and I wanted to close off with kind of a modified version of something that's actually in a children's book. But be friends. Enjoy each other. Marriage should be an enjoyable thing. And so I just want to read this to you, and we'll call it the end of our series here. I like you, and I know why. I like you because you're a good person to like, and that's the way I feel about it. I like you because when I tell you something special, you remember it for a long time. You say, Do you remember when you told me something special? And then we both remember something special together. When I think something is special, you think it's special too. When I think something's funny, you laugh. I think I'm funny, and I think you're funny too. I love it when we laugh together. When we laugh out loud, it really cracks me up. I like you because you know where I'm ticklish, and you don't tickle me there except for just a little bit until I say, ooh, stop, stop, help, help. And I know where to tickle you too until you say, oh, stop, stop, help, help. I like you because you know how to be silly. Boy, you are silly sometimes. I've never met anybody sillier than me until I met you. I like you because you know when it's time to stop being silly, like maybe the day after tomorrow, or maybe when the clock says it's 1:15 silly. I like you because I like just hanging around with you. We fool around the same way all the time. Sometimes we don't say a word. Sometimes we go on and on and on and on. If I'm pretending I'm drowning, you pretend to save me. If I am getting ready to pop a paper bag, you're getting ready to jump. That's because you really like me. You really do like me, don't you? And I like you right back. And then you like me right back, and that's the way it keeps going back and forth all day, every day. I like you because when I'm sad, you don't always try to cheer me up right away. You always know if I want to be sad just for a little while. And then when I'm ready to be cheered up, there you are, cheering me up. I like you because when I'm mad at you, you're mad at me right back. Until it's time to stop being bad, and then we make up. And I really like making up with you. I like you because when I'm really sick and I'm going to throw up, you're really sorry for me. You do not pretend to be busy so that you don't have to care. You say, maybe it was something you ate. You say, the same thing happened to me one time, and the same thing did happen to you one time. If I break my arm, you break your arm too. I tell you about mine, and you tell me about yours. We write our names on each other's casts. We show everybody, and then they wish they had broken arms too. If I find 2 4-leaf clovers, I give you 1. If you find 4, you give me 2. If we find 3, we just keep looking. I like you because, well, I don't know why, but everything that happens is nicer when it happens with you. I can't remember when I didn't like you. It must have been really, really lonesome then. I like you because there's so many reasons I can't name them all. I just know that liking you was the best choice I think I ever made. If we had to do it over again, we would go on choosing each other over and over and over. Why do I like you? I guess I just like you. I guess I just like you because I like you. And I'll never, ever, ever, ever stop. I hope that is what your marriage is about. That's what ours has been about. 31 years almost. And we still laugh, and we still like each other, and she still has to be patient. Father in heaven, thank you for giving us such a wonderful time together as husband and wife, and we pray for those who are watching this and preparing for marriage. Dear God, please bless them. Bless them with wonderful marriages, with Christ-centered marriages, with marriages full of laughter. In Jesus' name.